So, a very, very, very good morning to those who are here live on the Zoom, and to those of you joining us on YouTube later. Then good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is the fifth of our 6 sessions, this brief, frustrating look at Prajnaparamita. And so let's start in the very best of ways. Last week I mentioned we're in this special time of year for the Tibetans. It's one of the 4 great Buddhist festivals. So we have 14 days from new moon to full moon, where we celebrate the Buddha's miracles. In the scriptures, the miracles happened as a sequence. It wasn't as though here and there in the Buddha's life he performed the occasional miracle. They seem to have come in a rush. But anyway, the main point of the Buddha's miracles was to show that he could do them, but they weren't that important. There were lots of people with what they call siddhis, special powers. At the time of Buddha, people are very impressed by extraordinary powers, and you don't need to be enlightened to get extraordinary powers. In order to show that what Buddha was teaching about how to go beyond suffering, how to master one's mind, to show that it included all the other things, he had to show that he could do extraordinary things, but it was limited. He wasn't going around all the time performing miracles. So anyway, we celebrate that over 14 days, and we're in the middle of that just now, and today's Medicine Buddha Day is supposed to be a special day too. So let's keep that in mind while we do our prayers, and we give rise to as kind, a loving, as sincere a motivation as we can. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment, through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and of plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being totally beyond suffering and attain great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamavati shameta shatru kurim arajite karota ke orinte jovati oloyane pishudane male malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana omuki paramuki amuki shumedawane Savagraha bandhanane nigrihitva savabhava pravadina vimukta marapasha savitva buddhamudra anudgatita savamare putsarita parishuddhe vigashantu savamara kama. Glorious Guru, seated on lotus and moon seat above our head, through your immense kindness ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we are continuing with our studies of Prajnaparamita. Last week, as I said at the end of the teaching, was a frustrating teaching for me. We touch on so many topics, and that's all we do. We touch on them. It's like giving headers in a text, but then no details, no time. And then, as I've said many times, it takes not just extra hours or even weeks, but months and years to really get the full taste of those different Prajnaparamita teachings, several of which we did last week. So anyway, that's what this course is to tell you what's going on. It's important that we take away from this course the understanding that in Mahayana Buddhism, the most important thing is to understand the two truths, ultimate and relative. I'm sure you know in Theravada Buddhism, the big deal is the four truths. Properly speaking, the four truths of realized beings, of Aryas, but usually called the Four Noble Truths in what is really an inadequate translation when you know the context. It's not the Four Noble Truths, although they are very noble, but it's the four things which are true when you get there, when you become a realized being, an Arya, an Arhat. So anyway, that's the big deal for them. For us in Mahayana Buddhism, of course, we have the Four Truths as part of our teaching. In Mahayana, we keep it in its proper place, which is when we study the path and the practice of those who've got deep realization. Then we look at the Four Truths of those with deep realization. Anyway, that's another topic. But for us, we need to know that our bodhisattva journey depends on us properly understanding this general overview of the two truths. We saw at the beginning of this paramita, comparing the first 5, skillful means, and number 6, wisdom. And it says, without wisdom, the first 5 will never take you to enlightenment. So that wisdom, even though we're exploring the details a little bit in a frustrating way, that wisdom is to understand the two truths, relative and ultimate. One very important understanding of the two truths is that they are not separate. There is not a relative truth, samsara, down here, and some ultimate truth, which is other, away, beyond, like heaven. All the refutations that we've been looking at, because in the last week or two, we've mainly been looking at refutations, the no part of Prajnaparamita, what the Samkhyas think, what the Abhidharmikas think, what the Jains think. we're saying. So what do they think? They think, in one way or another, there is an ultimate reality in its own right. This whole thing about voidness and interdependence, something that exists in its own right. There's ultimate truth. Bye-bye. I'm going into ultimate truth. It's like Elon Musk going up into space. Bye-bye the world, and they're going into some dimension, which is voidness, which is ultimate truth. So there's a lot of talk in texts we are not exploring in this. But for instance, in the main Buddha Nature text from a Sangha, we are so fortunate we have a Sangha's own commentary. Very often we read later commentaries from masters about original texts. A Sangha wrote his own commentary while he was alive. That's terrific. So we don't have to argue with each other, what did he mean? He could tell us, this is what I meant when I put this into verses. So there's a discussion in there. And then in Jamgon Kongtrul's commentary about this word shunyata, and the ta at the end of shunyata. If there was an ultimate reality, it would be the void. The void. Shunya. Shunya without the ta. We don't have that in Bodhisattva teachings. We have shunyata, voidness. It's not the void, it's the voidness of our relative experience. So, looks like a mirage, looks like there's water there. That's the experience. You see shimmering light on the road, on the desert. And then the voidness is that we understand it's a trick of the light. It's happening in our brain, but there's no something out there as there seems to be. We still see the shimmering. So it's always the voidness of our relative experience. There cannot be the ultimate without the relative. It's the ultimate aspect of the relative. So to give you a simple example, anyone can understand these days with our scientific sort of rough knowledge. You, me, this, what's going on right now. On another level, it's all particles, atoms. It's 99.9% space. You know, they're tiny, tiny little particles. Huge spaces between them. It's like on our level, we have these huge distances between us, the other planets, the stars, so far away. And then you go right down to the atomic level. It's the same down there. There's these things we call particles. Nobody ever got one. We just see their effects through machines. But anyway, so much space between them. And even then, there may not be particles. There may just be energy. So when we get down to that level, where Ken ends and the space in between me and the camera begins, and the camera and you, it's just one, what Einstein called continuous field. A field of particles, energies, space. But when we come up to our level, there's me, and there's a camera, and at the other end, there's you. And that's what we perceive. And if we could zoom up again to another level, we'd disappear and we wouldn't even be tiny specks. This is our relative reality. Sometimes, quite often, Taisitupa would start teachings saying, here we are in human bodies on planet Earth. This is our relative reality. So we are looking at, but ultimately, but we're not looking at atoms and energy and space. That's the material world, or the appearance of a material world. We're looking at ultimately in terms of existence, mind, what's really going on. Is there God doing all of this? Is there a huge universe manifesting? Or whatever. So far we've been looking in Prajnaparamita at other people's idea of an ultimate reality existing. And we're trying to understand, is it right? Did they get it? Have they found it? Or is there something that's not quite right there? Or a lot quite not right? And so we're in this no section. And so, to quote Winston Churchill, why are we studying it? To keep going. Winston Churchill, he said it about something else, but he just said keep going. So we don't want to get detoured on our path through our experience, because all these other ideas came through masters with amazingly profound experience through their practice. The Jains, the Samkhyas, and so on. I don't know how profound or how vast your spiritual experience is, but we must be ready, because that's where we're going, to go into a world of so many powerful experiences that most people don't even know exist. And we don't want to draw the wrong conclusions. When we say wrong, I mean things that hurt us, delay us on our journey to become what the Buddha became. So we want to not be diverted here or there. We want to keep going. We need the advice of Nagarjuna and all the great teachers who say, yes, yeah, that's sort of true, but. So last week we were looking at a little bit about arisal, coming into being, and how there is the idea of a universe existing as a something in its own right that's doing all of this, or gods existing in their own right who are doing this relative reality, making it happen. And we're trying to find out what is behind all of this. And where we ended last week was about the mind. So we're in a sort of Buddhist world of mind, what in our own thinking we think of as my mind. Or sometimes if you've encountered texts, you've got a kind of more cosmic idea of mind. Mind does this, mind does that, mind manifests like this or that. And at the end of last week, we came to a point where two of the things I've mentioned, Prajnaparamita as theory and Prajnaparamita as practice, where they come together. So it was really interesting, and I was in a rush because the clock had already gone past the hour. But I'd like to just highlight what was said there. It was, you remember last week, we were looking at ideas of percepts, a real world out there, and a perceiving mind, and seeing, can any of these things really and truly exist in their own right? Of course they exist on our relative level of reality. Us humans experience that. Nobody's contesting that. But we're saying, are they entities in their own right, just the way we experience them or not? That's what we're looking at. So are there percepts, things to be perceived? Is there a perceiving mind? In everyday language, in relative level speech, of course there is. Otherwise you couldn't be attending this talk, could you? If you weren't a perceiving mind, and if each of you weren't perceiving this talk in your own way, quite uniquely. I mean, there's 33 participants, there's 33 versions of this talk going on just now in terms of perceivers. So of course, we're not refuting that. As I've said many times, if we were refuting that, then Buddha would never have taught in the first place. He wouldn't have taught non-existing people. He would have disproved his own teachings on voidness if voidness meant they don't exist at all. He would be classed as a maniac. People who go around talking to people who don't exist at all, they're generally not well. He spent 45 years in great detail outlining a lot of things which don't exist ultimately to people who don't exist ultimately. They don't exist in their own right. They exist interdependently, impermanently. There, no problem. That's what the Buddha teaches. So, anyway, with the perceiving mind, we can approach it in the theory of Prajnaparamita about why it can't exist. And there we saw last week, if we can't establish percepts as existing in the first place, then a mind that perceives them can't be established either. Like I said, it takes weeks, months to explore that through the logic, to debate it. So it's cast iron logic. No, you can take it to the appeal court, to the highest court, to the, what's the very top one, the Supreme Court, and still the argument will stand up. There cannot be a perceiving mind if we cannot establish percepts in the first place. That's the theoretical way. It takes a lot of time and a lot of study and a lot of debate and a lot of thinking, which many of us are never going to do, right? We're never going to do that. Don't have the time, the energy, or the opportunity. But last week, I mentioned that in Mahamudra teachings, the Dzogchen teachings, deep Prajnaparamita practice, then this is very, very important. It's what we'll spend a lot of our time doing. So we try to find our mind, what we call our mind. What is the mind that's doing all of this? We can see what it's doing. Now it's thinking, now it's remembering, now it seems to be perceiving a world around it, other people and so on. It's experiencing its karma. We can see that moment after moment. That's how we start meditation. We have to learn not to be distracted, keep our attention where we want it, but then when we turn it to mindfulness of mind, we see the mind, we experience the mind, doing what it does relatively, interdependently, impermanently, changing all the time, changing story. But this question is, what is the mind? What is doing all this? What's doing all of this? What is the actor that's playing all of these roles? What is mind? And we look for it as sincerely as we can, and with the help usually of our meditation teacher, because you feel like you, and when we get a little bit of meditation experience, a little bit of Dharma knowledge, rather than saying this is me as something solid, we think my mind. So this feeling is there all the time. I'm seeing, I'm remembering, or my mind is experiencing, my mind is fantasizing, my mind is distracted. Okay, we can see the distraction, we can see the fantasy, but what is the mind that's doing it? Is there anything there that we can pin down and say, that's it. That's my mind, found it. And no matter what you've read, from Saraha, Tilopa, the Buddha, Nagarjuna, about the answers to this question, the best thing you can do is forget all of that. It's hard, but then you are a very sincere practicer. You don't think, I know the answer to this anyway. Okay, my teacher said I've got to sit there and try and look for my mind, but I know I'm never going to find it, because Buddha didn't find it, Tilopa didn't find it, Gampopa didn't find it. So how the hell am I going to find it? I know I'm not going to find it. And so anyway, better look, because that's what he said to do. That's what she said to do, your teacher. But it's half-hearted. We need to be like a hound on the scent, like a dog with its nose to the ground. I feed squirrels here. I'm surprised how poor-sighted they must be, because if you throw a nut on the ground, rather than see it and go to it, they start sniffing and they get to it, sometimes in a very sort of roundabout way, through their nose. So we're not looking for an answer where you can go back smart to your teacher and give an answer. The point is to look again and again and again, ruthlessly. You're going to find it, because it's what you feel every moment. This mind is doing that, but what is this mind? So then we get some help in the instructions from the texts. Yeah, the texts, they help us look, although really, when you get into it, the point is, it's like catching it. I've had in this house for years a constant problem with mice. Now, I wish I was quick enough to catch them, because then I could take them a long way away to a nice place and give them a new life. Of course, I use humane traps, but this idea of when you see one, just sometimes go right next to you. If you were quick enough, you could catch it. There's a very interesting picture on social media from about 100 years ago of a famous rat catcher in London. He had 4 terriers and 3 trained foxes for catching rats. But the idea of catching it is the point. So when you're sitting, meditating, and you are, whatever it is, looking at a candle flame, then this perceiving mind, we try and catch it in the moment as it's happening. What is this? Try and find it. Is this coming from my heart center, my brain? Is this perception kind of everywhere and all pervading or localized? If I perceive a flame, there must be a part of the perception that reaches out to the flame. Otherwise, it could never make contact. So rather than think about it, and we're not talking about conceptual analysis, as you're actually sitting there looking at a flame, listening to a sound, you try to find the mind that's doing it. Now, this is an absolutely vital practice that we need to do, the texts say, again and again and again. Second after second, through hour after hour, week after week, month after month, so that we become absolutely clear about what this mind is. Relatively, we can speak about it. It's so useful. can say my mind's doing this, or my mind was distracted, your mind tends to do this. Such useful language. What are we talking about? Nobody ever found it. It's like an imaginary friend. You see my friend here, George, sitting next to me? If I start telling you, well, George is like this, he goes to the pub 3 times a week, and he wears leather trousers, can make a whole story of George. But he never existed. Nobody ever found him. That's weird, isn't it? And you're going to start avoiding me when I come up, and then I start talking about, well, George, like this. You're going to go, oh, yeah, all right, I got to go. I got an appointment. It's Ken talking about George again. But we're talking about mind all the time. An enlightened mind, a samsaric mind, mind's experience in the hell realms, where mind is settled and stable. We're talking about it all the time. It seems to make sense. This is relative truth. But what we're saying here, like what all this is about, but really and truly, ultimately, what is it? Now, the only way we can get realization as opposed to knowledge is through this long process of whenever we feel our awareness, whatever you want to call it, your awareness, your consciousness, the me, the experiencer, we try and catch it in the moment. So last week I said, you can't. And even from the outset, you'll know you can't catch it in one way, like a sword can't cut itself, no matter how fast it goes around, because what we are seeking with is what we are seeking for. So that's one thing, but nevertheless, we need to look for many, many reasons, and it is very, very fruitful, because this living search inside yourself will start to unpack the real meaning of shunyata and prajna-paramita, how all the things we experience don't exist in their own right, and so on. We'll have direct experience. We don't need words, we won't need theories, we won't need to argue. You'll get it. And because you've lived it for so many dozens and dozens of hours on your meditation cushion. So in the sutra requested by Kasyapa, we're on page 24. Kasyapa, the Buddha says, Kasyapa, mind is found neither within, nor without, nor in between. Kasyapa, mind cannot be investigated, cannot be shown, cannot be used as a basis, cannot appear, has no abiding state. Kashyapa, mind has never, is never, and will never be seen, even by any of the Buddhas. So that's an amazing set of statements, and we need to discover that for ourselves. Just knowing those words and having that truth in ideas is not enough, because we will still carry on acting like a me. Our awareness, our perception, and so on will still determine our lives and the karma we make for ourselves and with other people. The real way to go beyond is to understand the truth that mind does not exist. Ultimately, and of course relatively it does. This is the two truths. We have to understand there's two sides of the same coin. So in terms of what our mind experiences, dharma, phenomena. He says, in the Unwavering Suchness Sutra, every phenomenon is, by its very nature, by the way it is unborn. It never came into its own being. It didn't arise from itself, from other, combination of self or other, or without any reason. It's essentially non-abiding. It has no own state, its own being, its own home. That's what non-abiding means. It's free from the extremes of acting and action, and beyond the scope of thought and non-thought. Look at those words technically. It is beyond the scope of thought or non-thought. So just keep that in mind. We'll come back to that in maybe 10 minutes or so. Now the top of page 25 is a technical argument. It's the middle way refutation. Excuse me. In Mahayana, we have two main streams, schools. There is mind only and middle way. So the middle way teachings we're looking at here refutes the mind only's key point, which is that it's only mind. And just a moment. If it's all only mind, but nobody ever found mind, and Buddha never found it, and you'll never find it anywhere as anything, then having a whole philosophy based on its everything's only mind, that's a bit wobbly, isn't it? You're not on safe grounds there. So the middle way argument, we're talking about philosophers arguing words. They say this mind we talk about all the time. Nobody. So it says, since no one's ever witnessed mind, it's pointless discussing whether it is non-apperceptive, whether it is or not, apperceptive and self-illuminating. Now, I need to talk about this, but there's not much time. Apperceptive means knows itself. Knows itself. Self-illuminating means it's self-powered. It depends on nothing else. So in the mind-only teachings, these are two big deals. And when we come to other faiths and many of the deep Vajrayana teachings that you'll find, we have these terms. We say that Buddha nature knows itself. It cannot be known by anything other. It can't be known by the samsaric mind. When it happens, when it's revealed, it knows itself. It's apperceptive. What can know it? It can only know itself. It's a lot of teaching. And it is its own light of wisdom, its light of being. So all you need to know for today, and maybe one day you can explore in depth, is that what the middle way is refuting is the mind only's idea of mind. As something that exists. that exists independently. It does not equate to Buddha nature in the way that it's often taught in my courses, in our Kaju course. They've got their own idea of mind. So when we come to our understanding of Buddha nature, we use similar terminology, but with different understanding. It's very confusing. Three things: apperceptive, knows itself; self-illuminating; and the third thing, the basis of everything, alaya. So we use those in Mahamudra and in tantric teachings, but with a different meaning to the same terms used in the mind-only tradition. It's a huge topic, fascinating topic, but we don't have the months of study we need to go there today. I just need to tell you what's going on. So they're applying that in the mind-only tradition. They're applying that to their idea of mind. They say mind ultimately exists. That's the problem. In the middle way, we say nothing ultimately exists. Nothing. Everything is interdependent. There's no mind, sort of mind, big cosmic mind that exists. Anyway, so when we've explored that, then to make it even more complicated, let's go down halfway down the page to Tilopa, because many of us love Tilopa's sayings. We use them for our own path. He says, amazing, marvelous. It's a real cry of woo. He's not just a philosopher saying something. He starts his sentence with wow, woo, amazing. This self-cognizant, pristine awareness is beyond verbal expression. It is not the domain of the intellect. Now, this is really what Prajnaparamita is all about. We need to go beyond the intellect in all of its subtlety, the gross thoughts, the subtle thoughts, the assumptions that are the whole way we tick, the whole way we see life. You know, like people wear tinted sunglasses. Some even wear pink tinted ones. I mean, they're quite vivid, but it means they're seeing the whole world pink. And I prefer the brown tinted ones. Some of them are gray tinted. But once you've got those on, it colors everything. Our conceptual mind, in its subtlety, colors everything we experience every moment. We've got to go beyond that through meditation. It's the only way to go beyond it. You know, it's like rising up out of a jungle valley on a helicopter. We need to rise above that so we're no longer surrounded by the trees, the foliage, the steam, the insects. You need to rise above it so that you have a perfect view of what's going on in the jungle, but you're not saturated by it all around you. And all of our Prajnaparamita practice is about going beyond mind. It's not just concepts, it's all mental activity. It's everything that's in our stream of relative consciousness. So now the next big point in this chapter is middle of page 26, dismantling illusory belief in unreality. We'll do this one quickly. It's a topic we've often touched on in my courses. I think already in this course we touched on it. So it says, if we can't find anything that's real, that's truly existing, ultimately, independently, then is everything unreal? Well, in relative language, yeah, that's fine. We talk about that a lot. Like illusions, like dreams, the people in dreams, the places in dreams, they're just conjurations of our mind. They're not real in their own right. It's not as though in your dream world you went somewhere that really exists. So, do we believe in this word graha? Remember, it means to cling. It means to subscribe to a belief. It means deep inside you, you believe something is real, and so on. Do we graha? Do we believe in unreality? And then we get into philosophy. If reality can't be found to exist, then unreality, no point even talking about it. Unreality is a not. So if you've got an elephant, then this is a non-elephant. But if you can't define an elephant in the first place, then you can't define a non-elephant. You can only define a non when you've defined the. We've just been through a whole load of stuff, years of blah, 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 if we get really into it, about how nothing truly exists. So, of course, we don't have an unreality to believe in. Like you believe in God, I believe in unreality. But, do you believe in non-ego? Nobody ever found an ego, so non-ego. How can you believe in it? Voidness? Do you believe in voidness? Not do you believe that the arguments about the voidness of this or that are true, but do you believe in voidness? Is that your God? Is non-ego your God? Is voidness your God? This is what we're talking about. So if the two types of self-entity, remember, personal self, Dharma, things, have no authentic existence as real things, could they be non-existent, unreal? So no, they don't even exist as unrealities. Why? Because if there were true existence in the first place as something real, then when that ceases existing, then we could postulate non-existence. Just now I'm Ken, I exist in this world. When I die, then there'll be, relatively speaking, non-Ken. There won't be any Ken left in this world. We're gone. The non is only definable by what is or was. So, seeing as there is no is in the first place, no was, there can't be a non. But to believe in that, the non-things, the non-ego, the voidness, then, so Saraha, our great light in our lineage, the king, they call him the king of all the Mahasiddhas, the greatest Mahasiddha. He says, to believe in reality is to be like cattle. It means stupid. It was an insult. When people believe, they take things too solidly, too real, they suffer. He said, but to believe in unreality is even more stupid. So if you go around as what I call a grumpy Buddhist, no ego, void, doesn't exist. And that's what is your truth. And if we say believe in, that is what is your truth. you can get into really bad trouble. So the logical argument is there cannot be unreality, non-ego, or all the non-things, because we can't establish reality in the first place. That's the logical thing. Now, if we go to the middle of page 27, what is the mistake? He says, it's a whole section, the mistake of believing in non-existence. It says, if belief in existence is the root of suffering, the root of samsara, believing in me, I, making things more solid and real than they are, if that's the root of samsara, is believing in non-existence the way to liberation? He says, no, it's a worse mistake than believing in reality. It's a worse mistake. So he says the same, Gampopa repeats himself. It's normally not good form in literature to repeat yourself. Gampopa tells us Saraha's quote again, to believe in reality is to be like cattle. To believe in unreality is even more stupid. So in the sutra called the Heap of Jewels, then Buddha says, Kasyapa, the view of personality, even an ego as big as Mount Meru, is relatively easy to abandon, to get rid of. But not so for the decidedly arrogant view of voidness, where what you're believing is the non-existence. Now, unfortunately, in Buddhist circles, sorry to say it, this goes on. People's own truth is to believe in non-ego, non-self, in the non-existence of things, to believe in that, to believe in that. That's your belief, that's your truth. Now, what does it mean? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? We want to become liberated like Buddha, like Milarepa, like Saraha. That's what we want. So what Gampopa and these great teachers, Saraha, are telling us is you can get rid of your historical delusions of me and ego fairly easily with a remedy, which is to see through them, to see there's no ego. It wasn't there in the first place. That's the remedy. It's described like an enema. You know, you're constipated, you take a laxative, not an enema. You take a laxative. Good, it gets rid of your constipation. But if you keep taking the laxative, if you become a laxative addict, because the chocolate's nice, you know, it's in chocolate, then you've got big problems. You're literally in the shits. You know? So we need to know what is a remedy, and we need to know its limits and when to stop it. But if we don't do that, then we go around all the time in our mind, just like we experienced things in ourselves as real before, you're beating yourself up as don't exist, and you're criticizing the world as doesn't exist, then it says this is the decidedly arrogant view of voidness. And so it's really a huge mistake to avoid. We need to know the teachings on voidness, the no teachings, the non-this, non-that, are remedial. This is why the Buddha turned the Dharma, the wheel of Dharma, the third time. In the wisdom of the root verses of the middle way, Buddha says, those who believe in voidness are said to be incurable. Incurable. Then he gives the example of the laxative. that I just gave. If we believe in reality, if we believe in samsara, at least you'll be, well, not necessarily, but if you're a good-hearted person, you'll be a good person. You'll believe people are real, you want to help them when they need help, when they are suffering. If you have some idea of karma, then you want to make good karma. You will revere being a good person. It will mean a lot to you. You will have conscience. You will have a sense of goodness and virtue and morals and ethics. But if you believe in non-existence, you believe in that thing, nothing exists, I don't exist. And it's a dismissive belief rather than a remedial belief for when your mind gets stuck in reality. If it's a dismissive, constant belief, then you won't care for people. They don't exist, they're illusions. You won't care for yourself. I don't exist anyway. So we're talking about Prajnaparamita, the finest wisdom. You can't buy it in a shop. You can't get it through reading a few lines. You need to explore deeply through meditation and with a good heart and with morals and ethics. What is going on here as I learn about voidness? What am I becoming? Where am I going? Am I following the path to enlightenment? Or am I taking myself into an incurable insanity where I've dismissed the pain of my fellow beings? I've dismissed the beauty of real enlightenment for what? The whole point, an idea. This is the whole point. You've gone from being pickled in one set of ideas we call samsara, and now you're pickled in a new set of ideas, which is Buddhist blah, 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 about voidness and doesn't exist. Our helicopter is to go beyond all ideas. It's the whole point. The ideas are a prison. They keep us locked up in a tiny space. You know, prison is walls. They're really close. You can't go beyond them. You take down those walls, it's infinity. It's a quantum leap. You take down the wall. So our wall is being locked up in our own projections, ideas, beliefs, graha, in reality, all of it, reality and non-reality. So we have to go beyond the Buddhist ideas. So that's what it says in the bottom of page 28, the mistake of both beliefs. Exist is the view of permanence, and does not exist is the view of nihilism. You see, it's not Buddha's teaching. The remedial teachings on voidness are remedies to help us out of samsara. It's not the Buddha's teaching about what really is. So it does not exist as a view, as a belief is nihilism. Relatively, it's useful. It gets rid of our problems. When we've made it too solid an identity, non-ego teachings really help us. When we are clinging to outer reality, in all of its ways, then the teachings on the voidness, the interdependence of all those things, the impermanence, really helpful. We don't make them so solid, so real. But if it's our view, then it becomes nihilism, not the Buddha's teaching. So now the middle of page 29. Now we switch from the no, 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 no. No exists, no not exists, don't believe in any of it, to the point. So what is the path to liberation? One may wonder, Gampopa says, then what does bring liberation? It is the middle way, which does not abide in extremes. Then from the Jewel Garland, there's a very important quote, which is unpacked by Gampopa. Those who fully understand the truth just as it is, do not depend on the two, and will become liberated. So fully understand the truth just as it is. So this is not words and concepts now. This is from our direct experience in meditation through transmission. Just as it is means that each and every phenomenon is and always has been non-existent in its own right, non-arising, non-produced. You understand that the truth does not depend on the two, permanence, rayism, or whatever, means things exist, and nihilism, things don't exist. All the various beliefs will be liberated from samsara. And then Gambar says, what is the middle way then? So, and then there's some quotes now. We're looking at middle way. It's the point now. The middle way, please understand this, as many Buddhists don't, is not a halfway compromise. If exist is one extreme, or ego, let's say, is one extreme, and non-ego is another extreme, the middle way isn't half an ego. If one extreme is white and the other one is black, the middle way is not grey. The middle way means simply it avoids any extreme. It's not a middle as a halfway. It means you never veer to the extreme. And it's a terminology that goes very deep. When we do yogic practice, we have central channel, and you know in your meditation experience what it means to be what many people would call centered. Then you feel when you lose that, your energy rises up, it manifests from a state of peace. It's like at a dinner table when you want to say something. You know, everyone's talking, you know that feeling of, and then before you can open your mouth, somebody else started talking, or the previous person won't stop. And you've got this, and there's something that really wants to come out. That kind of energy is almost like an animal trying to jump out of your chest. We've experienced that in meditation. We call it trupa in Tibetan. And the stage we reach in Mahamudra is called Trachal, when you're not manifesting in any way anymore, you're peaceful. It's so nice. No need for any of all of that. Ideas, thoughts, expression, nothing. It's all so good, perfect in itself. But none of this. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. Middle way in terms of not getting into any kind of graha, clinging, belief, projection. You don't believe in anything. This is radical. We're looking at the end of our path now, further down the path. We need beliefs to get there, and then we go beyond beliefs. We need thoughts to get there. We need prayers to get there, but then we go beyond thoughts, beyond prayers. Very important to understand. There is a path with its stages. So the Buddha says to Kasyapa, you know, Mahakasyapa, amongst the Buddha's students, was his best meditator. Mahakasyapa, the Buddha made head of Sangha when he died. Kasyapa is a very fascinating person in Buddhist history. Spent a lot of his life in a tiny little stone hut. I've seen it. I think what they say is the place, and even if it wasn't the actual place, it was something like that. It's on a hill opposite Vulture Peak in India. Amazing place. When you get near it, your hair stands on end. So anyway, Kasyapa Buddha is telling him, Kashyapa, what's the correct way for bodhisattvas to approach phenomena? It is this. It's the middle way. The correct, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Remember in our definition of Prajnaparamita at the beginning? The correct, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Kashyapa, what is this middle way, which is a proper discerning appreciation of phenomena? Kashyapa, permanence makes one extreme. Impermanence makes the second extreme. Whatever lies between these two extremes, or is free of these two extremes, cannot be analyzed. Cannot be analyzed. Cannot be analyzed. Can't be written about, talked about, thought about. Can't be analyzed. That's the thing to get our heads round today. Even if Ken talked to you, or Taisitupa talked to you, or Buddha talked to you for 1 million years, there is still no way. Our structuring mind, this is what we mean by analysis. Our structuring mind filled with ideas and words, references, it cannot get it. Just like your tongue cannot hear sounds, your ears hear sounds. It cannot be analyzed. It cannot be shown. And this is why we need to keep trying again and again to find our mind, because no teacher can show you this, can zap you, can blast you. They can help you get there, but it has to come from within ourselves, this realization. It cannot be shown. It cannot be known by our consciousness, relative consciousness. Kashyapa, this is the middle way, which is the correct, discerning appreciation of phenomena. Kashyapa, self is one extreme. No self is the second extreme. We could say ego, non-ego there. Kashyapa, samsara, and so on. So what is the middle way? It is what lies between these two, or free from these two, cannot be analyzed, cannot be shown, not apparent, it's totally unknowable by the relative mind. Samsara is one extreme, nirvana is another extreme. Same thing, cannot be shown, cannot be analyzed. This is the middle way. So if we go halfway down the page, it's only called middle to let us know that it's free from extremes, but it's not a middle. And Taisitupa very often, he explains, it's like the center of space. There is no place that's the center of space. It's the center of our galaxy. But if you have a kind of modern quantum physics idea of the shape of the universe, it's like kind of you tape a Möbius ribbon and you make it 3D, 4D, 5D, then everywhere you are is the center of the universe. There is no middle. So kind of, we use the word middle simply to mean not extreme. If we get time today, then we'll come to a closer definition of what we mean by extreme. The middle itself is never something that can be examined. It is beyond the intellect, free from worldly understanding. Atisha says, the past mind has stopped. It's destroyed. It's gone completely. The future mind hasn't occurred yet. It's not born. The present mind is exceedingly hard to investigate. It's colorless, without form. It's like space, without concrete existence. So the next section, page 31, the nature of Nirvana is, well, what does it say? If all the phenomena of samsara have no true existence, either as things of substance, of matter, or of mind, insubstantial, then, so that's samsara. All this samsara we experience, if it's not mind, it's not matter, it's not substance or insubstantial, then is nirvana something real? Is all of this illusion, but there's a nirvana which is real, that has substance, has matter, has form, or is insubstantial, a mindscape of some sort. Some philosophers, Gampopa tells us, do consider nirvana to have some substantial existence. However, this is not correct. So this sutra called Jewel Garland explains, nirvana is not even immaterial. So what substance could it have? It's not even a mindscape, a mind state. If it were substantial, if it were heaven, I mean, this is basically what we're saying. Is there a nirvana? And so when I get there, and there I am in nirvana, oh, it's so nice. And then from my nirvana mindscape, well, you can do whatever you can do, but it's kind of a place, a state, a thing. Like going to heaven or whatever. Then if it was substantial, if it had substance, matter, then it would have to be a composite product made from causes and conditions. All composite things the Buddha taught eventually disintegrate. So the text calls the root of wisdom says that. It says, not only is it not made of substance, it's not even insubstantial. There is no existence of anything insubstantial in it. So it's not mind, it is not matter. Mind and matter, as we know them, use the term, define them like the Chittamatrans do. So what is nirvana? Well, it isn't. There is no isness of nirvana because the term itself is not referring to a state of mind, a state of matter. It simply means finished, no longer. Nirvana means samsara's ended. It's not telling you what's there. This is the point. State of mind, state of matter like a heaven. The word nirvana simply means it's over. It's like waking up from a dream. It's finished. Suffering has finished. That's what's finished. Suffering has finished. It doesn't tell you what's there. The term nirvana tells you what's no longer there. So what is it then? Nirvana is the exhaustion of all perception of a substantial existence or an insubstantial existence. It carries on from what we've just been doing, what we've just been looking at earlier today. There's not an is, there isn't the opposite of non. It's when all of our thinking, conceptual, relative stream of consciousness no longer is at work all the time. It's beyond the intellect and it's ineffable, it can't be expressed. So the end of all notions of substantial or insubstantial reality, that's nirvana. So now I'd like to deviate at the risk of confusing you, because we've been looking at Madhyamaka philosophy, middle way philosophy. It's what we've been following through this chapter. And I'd like to bring in something so useful that it's been kidnapped by other things. So we just saw the refutation of the Chittamatrin mind-only view, saying that their idea of mind is not quite correct. But within the Chittamatrin system and within their practice instructions, wow, there are some treasures. And so these have been kidnapped by Mahamudra. They've been kidnapped by quite a few Vajrayana traditions, because they are so good. And it helps us now in the state we're in is so helpful that I think bringing them in here just now, bringing one of their main teachings in just now will be helpful. But I need to tell you, my lawyer tells me I need to tell you, we've stopped following Gampopa's chapter now. This is a Ken interruption to help us understand what's going on, all right? Based on the Chittamatrins. So here we are, meditators, sitting on our cushion, trying to find out what's going on. So what the Chittamatrins tell us, or rather let's say what Mahamudra tells us, because it takes their idea, it says all the time there are three aspects to what's going on. The three natures of reality. The first one is what's being generated by karma. The main point is you can't do anything about that. It's happening each moment just now, like it's your karma to be in a Ken Holmes teaching just now, for all sorts of things. Our body, until you die, you're stuck in it. You can't become, if you want to, in the next moment, a hedgehog or a young person, or this body with its story from being so young and beautiful and healthy and getting old and older and older and that's your karma. The family you were born into, your parents, you can't change them for other parents, your siblings. The country you're born into, the time you're born into, like me, into the post-war hippie generation, but then those born later. That's your karma. And it's not just your karma, you have shared karma with the other people we experience in waking life. So all of that, and our interactions with it, which is so powerful, that's our life. That's generated by the past, and it comes up on screen every second. It's called other-powered in the scripture. It's driven by your karma. You can't change it very much, if at all. All we can do is change our karma in the long, long term. That's one aspect of what's happening right now. The second aspect is called the imaginary, and that is the work of our mind in many levels, feelings, thoughts, and so on, which is interpreting the karma that's being generated just now, reacting to it, coloring it, seeing it through eyes of fear, of anger, of pride, and defining it, putting labels on it, putting labels on the people we meet, putting labels on the reality we meet, putting labels on ourselves. The whole interpretive structure of what's happening in this moment, it's called the imagined. There we can do almost endless things to change that. That's where our Dharma teachings come in. The third aspect is ultimate truth, which in our level of teachings means our Buddha nature, our Buddha mind, which has always been there, underneath the play of karma and the play of projections. So our bodhisattva journey is to bring forth the Buddha mind. So we have to get rid of the rest. We have to get rid of the power of karma and get rid of the power of projections, interpretation, reactivity, and so on. And mainly that second thing, the power of the imagined, the interpretations, the reactivity, which in this case is what's generally summed up in English language translations as concepts. But it's not just thoughts, words in the head. It's the whole activity of our relative stream of consciousness in terms of interpretation. It's our reactivity and so on. So we need to go beyond that. So let's go back now to the meaning of the nature of Nirvana. In the guide in the Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avatara, whenever substantiality or insubstantiality no longer dwell before the intellect, when we're no longer in this trap of that mind work, in that moment, through the absence of other forms and within our non-objectification, our non-projection, there will be most excellent peace. So when we get out of this blathering mind, it's a Scottish word, blathering, it means blah, 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 and constant feelings, reactions, emotions, associations that are, we can't get out of it. Here we're getting out of it. So in the time when that's no longer dominating this moment, then there is peace. That peace is what we mean by nirvana. The suffering due to the way we interpret and react to our karma has shut up. We've gone beyond it. That's the jungle valley that surrounds us with its steam, its smell, its insects, its snakes, and so on. We've risen out of it through the helicopter of meditation. Peace. So nirvana is peace. This is quoted so many times. Nirvana is peace. Not a state of peace. Remember, it says nirvana is not generated by causes and conditions. So in meditation, in shamatha, in the dhyana teachings, we see we can make causes. You sit, you watch your breath, you focus, and so on. We make causes and conditions. State of peace. We're not talking about that, something which is a generated, when you look at it very closely, artificial state of peacefulness. We are free in the moment from all this busyness of our mind, the tropa, if we use more Mahamudra terminology, the tropa, remember, like wanting to speak, wanting to express, we're at peace. Nirvana is peace. In that peace, everything is the same. The good, the bad. Before what was good, bad, up, down. When you're in that peace, whether you are listening to Gesualdo or heavy metal, is the same. Now, of course, Gesualdo and heavy metal aren't quite the same in themselves on a relative level, but if you're in that state of peace, you won't be reactive, interpretive, all gone. So the Lotus Sutra says, Kasyapa, Buddha says to Kasyapa, Nirvana is the complete, very important word, complete assimilation of everything into sameness. So when we study the 5 Buddha wisdoms, sameness wisdom, we see at which stage of the path it starts to emerge, where it becomes very, very strong. Sameness. It's not an intellectually projected sameness where you're telling yourself, it's all the same, it's all the same, it's all the same. You know, that'll keep you very busy. You're in a state of peace. Well, anything of the 6 realms that manifests, there is a quality of sameness. You don't need to make it, think it, tell yourself, hypnotize yourself into it. It is like that. And as it said on the previous page, no words can describe this. No mind can analyze this. You need to get there through the practice of the Bodhisattva path, and in particular, meditation. Now, when you get there, middle of page 32, there is one of the most important verses, 4 lines, that's at the heart of the Buddha nature teaching. So now we're right in the 3rd turning of the wheel of Dharma. We've left the no-no-nos of the 2nd turning, we're in the 3rd turning. And by the way, this is from the Space Jewel Sutra, and you'll find different translations. It's not easy to translate into English. It's so beautifully compact and can sparkle in many meanings in the Sanskrit and Tibetan. It was part of my job to translate this one into English. Real challenge. Nothing to remove from this. Not the slightest thing thereon to add. Most properly beholding that which is most proper, when most properly seen, perfect liberation. So this is Buddha mind, the true nature of our mind. It's peace, it is nirvana, and when it is, now the first line, if we just live in words and logic and think like a computer, you've got a problem. Nothing to remove from this. What? Well, we've just been going through pages or years of study about there is no this, there is no mind, there's no this, not even not this is. And now we're in the 3rd turning. Oh, there's nothing to remove from this. What? What this? What thing? There's nothing to remove. So once we have transcended the jungle of our relative personal stream of consciousness, then we find the Buddha mind that's the same for you, same for me. That's beyond words, beyond expression. It cannot be thought about from the relative mind, cannot be analyzed by the relative mind, cannot even be directly experienced through the 5 senses or anything of the relative mind. But it will happen through transmission, through pointing out, through our meditation work in Mahamudra, Dzogchen. When you get there, there is very definitely a this. That this has been there all the time. That this never changes. That this is what it's all about and always has been. It's that this that's been interpreted by mystics as God, as the universe. Not quite correctly according to Buddhist teachings, but now we get to the authentic this. And when you're there, it's perfect. There's not the slightest thing ever that could ever make it better, be added to it. There's nothing to take away from it, remove. So we need to perfectly behold How do we do that? Well, we don't. In meditation, we learn to totally shut up so that Buddha mind knows itself. It is apperceptive, it is self-illuminating. We call it Buddha mind, but it's not mind, it's isness. True isness knows itself. There's some beautiful Sufi lines about this too. When it's known, how will it be known? Not by you, not by me. It will know itself. So anyway, that quote, nothing to remove from this, those 4 lines, is a gem. Please dwell with it for many years, and if you can, remember it. Now, the next section, very important. We'll just look at it for a few seconds. Page 34. The need for this finest wisdom to be cultivated. No, it just is. Okay, can't we just let it be? You try. The answer is, nah. Unless you're a 1 in a billion, who in your past lives, or maybe a million, I don't know, a billion, more like that, who in past lives has been there and been there and been there and been there. And then in this life, your Dharma practice can just wake it up and you're back there. That's what we're aiming for in our future lives as bodhisattvas, to get back home more and more quickly. But it needs to be cultivated. We need to follow a path. So if you look, it says there are 4 ways, 4 aspects to how we cultivate it. Through preliminary practices, mudra, through meditation, when we're on our cushion, what we do in post-meditation, off the cushion, and then through signs of familiarity. So we'll come back to that next week. And I think there we'll stop today. Some very important points today. And I hope some of it made sense. So let's dedicate whatever was good and useful to all of our fellow beings, not so fortunate as us. Maybe some of them never met Dharma, or they don't have the chance to practice. And then all the beings who are not human and terrible, terrible suffering from our place of immense good fortune. Then let's try and share everything that's good with all of them. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you very much. So, over to you, and hello and welcome to those I didn't say hello, and welcome to at the very beginning. If you have any comments or questions.
Ken, it's Steve.
Yeah, hi Steve. Yeah.
Just wow. That was phenomenal. I mean, I came across the middle way back in the 1960s, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And now you've put a completely, and I've read about the middle way and mind only, and never really got it. And today I think I've got it a bit.
Oh wow. I'd say
And
the same thing as you. Oh wow.
I don't know what it is. I love that saying, I was confused, now I'm confused on a higher level.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's a bit like that. Right?
That's my
And
job, to raise the level of confusion.
well, you've done that today for me. And I think the one thing about it is that I've never wanted to get involved in Mahamudra. I've done teachings, been to teachings with some eminent teachers on Mahamudra, and I even skipped your teaching on Mahamudra. But now I'm beginning to realise that that's what it's all about. I've really got to get into that. So you've inspired me to go back and watch your teachings on Mahamudra, maybe go through my old notes, but mainly just to sit down and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Ken.
Hi Neil.
I think Steve, probably not worth following on from what Steve has said, because that probably applies to all of us. But you mentioned the three aspects of what is being generated by karma, imagining, and ultimate truth. It's this what is being generated by karma that is so hard to see. I think it was last week you mentioned sniffing it out, so smelling what smells like karma, but
Yeah.
it's I don't have a good sense of smell in relation to anything, including karma, but it's so hard to see. Sorry, what sometimes it could be sort of seems to be obvious what is karma, whether good, bad, or indifferent karma, but it's hard to see what is caused by karma, good or bad, and what just is not caused by karma, because not everything is caused by karma. And I think that's the great difficulty.
Yeah, it's the only way is to learn as much as we can, and there aren't endless resources there to learn about karma, because it's almost by its own definition, it has to be as complicated as life itself. As we live each day, we are generating the causes of karma, and you look at moment by moment where our mind's at, where the action's at, and there's not just many levels, but there are many contradictory levels. Sometimes we say things which are harmful, and at the same time we're regretting what we say, and another part of us means it, and so on. So the creation of karma is complex, and the results are complex, and the way it works is incredibly profound. So we can only learn a little bit, but we need to do that. And then through our own experience as we mature as Buddhists, I think this quality to sense, sniff out karma comes more and more. But in line with today's talk, karma, when we study it, has three aspects: there's physical karma, and verbal karma, and mental karma. The problem is the first two are what in French we call ponctuel. In other words, you do it, the action's finished, and then you have to wait for the results in the future. So you do something physically, you help somebody through a physical act of kindness, you feed the hungry or whatever, or the opposite, you harm them, you take away their food. Or you say something helpful, harmful. Then when it's finished, the seed of karma is planted, And that will come back when you meet those people or similar circumstances in future lives. But the mental karma, the mind karma, is not plant a seed, blank, sometime in the future, whoop, here comes the result. The mental karma is ongoing. So when we are recognizing in the present moment what is generated by karma, then we have to recognize not just the circumstances where you're in contact with somebody or society or your own body and its health, and something's happening through past karma, but our mental karma are our own mental tendencies to react to that in a certain way, to feel sorry for yourself or see it as a very positive challenge. But that's your mind karma, the traditional way, or up to now, how you've evolved and how you're reacting to it, how you're telling yourself the story of what's happening. This is all about storytelling. So the second aspect, which is called the imagined, where we have power, is we can understand our psychological reactions, but we can be changing that story. Telling ourselves a story, a Buddhist story about changing the way our mind works. So this gets subtle because it's mind to mind. It's not simply how we interpret the present moment with our mind. It's how our mind is dealing with the present moment of our mind itself. Does that make sense? So this awareness of what's being generated by karma is body and speech karma from past lives bringing results now, but our mind karma as our mental conditioning. But when we look at the second aspect, which we call the imagined, it's there, it's our current, sunglasses, I used that earlier. So whereas before we might have been feeling sorry for ourselves when we get sick, now we think, no, now, wonderful opportunity for Tonglen, or this is a challenge. Now my life gets really interesting because I got the bad news from the doctor this morning. But it's a Dharma spin on things, but you're still struggling because you do feel sorry for yourself, and there's all your mind going, but why me, and all the rest of it. But then there's this glimmer of hope. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. There's one other thing. When you were talking about finding the mind or trying to find the mind, and you referred to a sword cannot cut itself, and you said what we are seeking with is what we are looking for. I think that's I would call it a profound statement. And it's very important. It reminded me of the time when I was 11 years old and my teacher was explaining why Descartes' "I think, therefore I am," it was the basis of Western philosophy and thinking ever since. And I didn't have the perception of why, but I got up and said, no, that's not true. That's nonsense. That's illogical. And I promptly got detention for questioning the teacher. But for me, it was that sort of obviously nonsense that that phrase about trying. What we are seeking with is what we are looking for. It's a sort of absurdity.
Yeah. And Descartes is misquoted anyway, because he says, what is it? It's not, I think, therefore I am. It's, I think that I am, therefore I am, was the original, which is quite different. I think that I am, therefore I am. But anyway, but where this gets interesting for us is when we come to relative level practice, this thing of watching the watcher. And can you or can't you do that? And in a certain way you can do it. You can become more aware of yourself as an awareness. We can do that on a relative level to a certain point. But then we come to, once we've worked with it, we realize it's like the dog chasing its own tail and going around faster and faster, or the sword trying to cut itself, or the eyes trying to see themselves. It can't happen, because what you're looking with is what you're trying to find. It just can't work in that way. And then when we come to like Mahamudra teachings, we find a different way of meditating. And sometimes in the other courses, I've used an example that works for me. It's not from the scriptures at all, but I often use it. And it's this example of if you're out in a restaurant for dinner with somebody and you say, don't look, but the people at the next table. So, no, don't look, because immediately they want to look. So you've got to pretend you're still talking, and somehow out the side of your eye is kind of, you see that hat she's wearing, or whatever you want to say. So your current reality is going on. So it looks like you're having a conversation with somebody, and you're having a conversation with somebody, but at the same time you're becoming aware of something else. So in that way, we don't try and catch the mind that's the observer. You observe the observer and like this, because it just doesn't work. We learn instead to relax and be.
Okay, thank you.
Then there, from that place of serenity, the whole process of an awareness and something being aware of the duality can be known differently.
Can I ask something?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. In this process of trying to establish or finding the mind and examining my thoughts, trying to work out where they come from, what they are. My problem is that I'm trying to distinguish which part of it is my brain. What is my brain doing? There is a difference between brain and mind. So in my understanding, which I'm at the start of really getting deeply into this, I always see the brain as the hardware that receives, just like the radio waves around us. We can't see them. We cannot prove that they are there other than through some sort of receiver, some electronic gadget. So I always feel that the brain is my hardware. It processes my mind. It sort of zaps my mind in and keeps it here. Yeah, but then when I'm sitting trying to work with this, that is my problem. How do you deal with that? Or am I completely off track?
No. I think it's a very pertinent observation, and brain is not so much talked about in the Mahayana teachings and literature as it is in the Vajrayana literature, and there, as long as you are alive, not quite as long as you're alive, because in the womb there is a process of the formation of the physical body and the nerves and the brain, so it only sort of comes into function before we're born in the womb. But even some parts of the brain, they don't really come to their fullness until we're about 20, like the prefrontal cortex and so on. So, but anyway, in general, while we're alive, the tantric teachings tell us you cannot separate body and mind. It's not just that there is a body and a mind and they influence each other. You cannot find where the one stops and the other one starts. And in particular with what we call mind, our feelings, our thoughts, and so on, then the brain takes an important role. But of course, when the body dies and the brain stops functioning, the question is, what happens next without a brain? Without a brain. And this is really very, very interesting. And if we use, like you do, an analogy like a radio set, I think these days we've got a super one, which is a computer. Because in a computer, you've got the chip, you've got the hard drive. The hard drive holds a lot of memory, data, and sometimes it's access to get the programs running. But it's not the everything of the computer. You've got the chip, you've got the operating system, and so on. So while we're alive, our brain is inseparable from the functioning of our mind. And as the brain's damaged, then our mind's functioning can be damaged. It stores memory. It stores lots of things. So what we're looking at with Dharma is an understanding that when we die, it's like your hard drive collapses on your computer. What stays is what's deeply imprinted. So lots of our life information, the whole thing that was needed for us to function as a body-mind binôme stops. But what stays and what goes with you into the in-between life state and onto the next life is your karma, and in particular, the mind karma that's deeply enough imprinted to survive death. And so some things will survive death and lots of things won't. And there's no complex explanation of that. But if you do a lot of meditation, you study the tantric teachings somewhat, then we start to get the idea, especially if we know something more about Bardo experience. And then we observe babies, children. I mean, if there is karma and reincarnation, gosh, what a fantastic field of research. What from their past lives do babies have? What emerges as they grow up in terms of their personality, their reactivity? And then as the karma matures, and especially when we get to the age of, leaving home, we pick up karma that's been waiting until then to be picked up. Now, will we go quickly back into Dharma or not? Because for instance, our link with Dharma, our samaya, that survives. Our link with deep teachings, deep meditation, that survives death. It's not brain dependent, in other words. It goes into what we call our stream of consciousness. And while we're alive, it doesn't depend on the brain for what it is. And so Dharma is so precious from that point of view, because it means if our body and brain get damaged, there can be a level of awareness still there, even though in terms of other people's impression of us, we are poorly functioning, we can't speak very much, we're very slow, and so on. But our inner connection with what is sacred and what is true can be there. And then when the moment of death comes, amazing release. Because all the impediment of being embodied in a sick body, a dying body, is finished. And the mind is so much more in contact with the everything and a possibility of witnessing, experiencing, being Buddha mind. So it's a fascinating question. There's no direct, the thing is, there's no simple answer. But I hope what I said helps a bit.
Thank you so much. It certainly does. And thank you for your wonderful, wonderful teachings.
You're welcome.
Many, many thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Charlie.
Just a wee point on the Scottishness. It's not blathering, it's blethering.
Oh, blethering.
Yeah, the blethering mind.
All right. But it's spelt with an A. Yeah.
No, it's
No, it's
B-L-E-C-H.
all right. Spelt with an A. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Just another thing, if it maybe makes sense to you, it was said before by our meditation teacher. You're trying to get something. There's no point because there's nothing to get and no one to get it.
Mm.
Yeah. Does that make a kind of, I don't know, sense?
It's good to know that from this. I mean, according to what my teachers tell me, and this is not Ken Holmes' opinion. This is very much in the scriptures, and what my own Tibetan teachers have told me is that it's very good to know that from the start, because that's where we're going to end up. We don't want to end up and say, "Oh my goodness, did all of this come to this?" Where there's nothing to be got and there's nobody to get it. I've been ripped off all those years in the Dharma centers. We need to know that's the case from the start, but we also need to know there is a very real need to practice a path and to acquire some things and to get rid of other things. So in that 4 lines I read today, there's nothing to add to this. There's nothing to take off. And if you listen to Taisitapa teaching, the very traditional teachings, the whole path is about accumulation, purification. Purification is getting rid of stuff. Accumulation is acquiring more and more qualities. So the point is, you can't just stop being ego. You can't stop being a somebody in a stream of consciousness. We can only change it as quickly as we can, but it takes years at the best of cases. So while we're still somebody, we'll have harmful things to get rid of, and telling ourselves, oh, but there's nobody and there's nothing, won't help. You'll become more stupid than cattle that Saraha talks about. That is harmful, it's painful, it hurts other people. You've got to stop it. And this is such a wonderful quality. Love in your heart. Who has enough? I don't. We need more. We need to become a more loving bodhisattva. So there's acquiring and there's shedding, as long as we are somebody. But all of that process of the path is beautiful. We become a bodhisattva in our mind. We become less and less solid. So we take ourselves to a place where we can transition into this purity of realizing Buddha mind was always there and our personality just dissolves. So we need to know that's where it's going to end up. But we also need to know it will never end up there unless we do that work of purification and accumulation. Even brilliant people. That's why we read the stories of Tilopa and Naropa. Naropa was India's best Buddhist in the monasteries. He was the head of Nalanda. His knowledge, his influence, everybody loved him. They wouldn't let him go. They wouldn't let him go. He wanted to go. And they said, you can't leave us, we need you. He was the best Buddhist. If there was, Time magazine, he would have been Buddhist of the Year in India. Yet he knew he had further to go. And he had to go to Tilopa. So in the end, he had to act crazy. He had to go on the monastery roof naked, throwing texts into the air, so that they said, oh, he's lost the plot, and they looked for somebody else. Then he was free to go off and see his teacher. So even he, once he went to Tilopa, needed at least 12 years of practice to become fully enlightened in that lifetime. So of course, if even somebody like that needs that much, how much more so do we, in the state that I'm in, certainly need to follow a relative path? But we know at the end, when there's no more ego, there'll be nobody there. There won't be somebody experiencing it. So we need to know that from the beginning. It's true.
Great, thank you.
Okay, everyone.
Question
Sorry,
in chat.
James.
Vic's microphone's not working, and she put a little question in chat.
Oh, yeah.
Time to quickly answer that one.
Okay, the chat, just a second. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great book about karma. Yeah, there's a reference. Question,
That's right,
the imaginary aspect you talked about, is this where we traditionally speak of klesha? Yes, but yes, we speak of klesha. Getting rid of klesha is how we become free of suffering, but only by getting rid of what we call the cognitive obscuration, the mental duality, will we become Buddha. So there's a difference between getting out of suffering and getting the Buddha's nirvana, the non-abiding nirvana. So we need to, the projected part of our mind, the imaginary part, is partly the klesha, the clinging, the anger, the upsetness, and all of that. But it's also the whole dualistic storytelling that's there, that's conceptual. So there's that as well. Okay. Time to go.
Ken, can I just quickly say something? Because I'm hoping to go to Holy Isle on Wednesday. So if it all goes, if I manage to get on the boat and all, I'll be missing for a few weeks. So
All right.
so I'll be looking forward to seeing you all when I come back.
Have a great retreat, huh?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Have a lovely time on Holy Island, Dorka.
Well, thanks so much. It's my first time to go, and
Oh, it's a wonderful, wonderful place.
oh, thank you. Thanks,
Enjoy.
Okay. See you all
Thanks,
next week.
Ken.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Trana.
Bye-bye.
Bye.